Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. Okay, it is 12:03. We are going to begin the meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board of January 31, 2022. We have three VCBB board members present. We have Laura Sevilla, Dan Nelson, and myself, which constitutes a quorum, and we'll kick off the meeting. Also from staff, we have Christine, Stan, Krista, and do we have Alyssa as well?
Alyssa's not. No, she's on vacation.
Okay, so Krista from staff. Is that everybody, Christine?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's begin. We find the PDF, and for some reason my PDF closed on me. So first item on our agenda, we've called the meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Oh, Holly's just joined us.
Excellent. Yeah. Hi, Holly.
No changes from staff end.
Okay. Any changes from the board that they would like to make? Holly, we just kicked off, so you haven't missed anything. All right, so the agenda stands. Let's go on to approval of the minutes from January 18th, 2022. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All right, hearing none, is there? Okay, moved. I'll second the motion. All those in favor of approving the minutes from January 18th, please say aye. 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 Any no's? Okay, so from the squeaky toy in the corner here. Minutes are approved. Get back to agenda. Okay, next item on the agenda is legislative update. Christine, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, we've done an extensive amount of work with this and have reviewed by several different parties. We actually reached out to Jim Anderson, who was with the capital funders, the capital advisors for AEC Fiber. We've reached out to the VCUDA Association. We've reached out to Eli Emerson and Paul Giuliani.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm going to turn this over to Stan to give the update on this one.
Okay. Stan, you're up.
I think Holly's raising her hand.
Holly has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Sorry to see that, Holly.
Sorry, Christine, could you just clarify that? You said you reached out to them. Did you get input from each of those individuals? Thank you.
Yes, we did.
Let me share my screen and then let's see. What is the... That is an old version. Let's share that one. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the Act 71 proposed changes that we discussed at the previous board meeting. As Christine said, we did get input from several interested parties. We had proposed two different, first of all, there are two separate places within Act 71 that talk about reversion of assets to the state. Part 86C and then Section 7. And we proposed changes to each of those. And the first is 8086C. And there are two alternatives proposed in the board packet. One option was where they would still revert to the state, but with some clarifying language that bondholders or creditors' liens would still be included once they went back to the state. The second option, being reverting to a court-appointed receiver with the same language about remaining subject to outstanding bondholders or creditors' liens. And these were two different concepts that built upon what we had proposed last meeting. And as we discussed them with the various folks, in the private sector and VCUDA, it became clear that the receivership option was the more popular of the two. So the one concern that VCUDA representatives raised was that
before we move on, sorry about that, my microphone was muted. If staff doesn't have an objection, I'd like to entertain questions as we go through the slides. Holly has her hand up.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty and Stan. So I really appreciate how you went about this. It's very methodical. Do you have, or were you able to obtain a legal opinion about whether a court has authority to appoint a receivership for a municipal entity, and or does this create additional legislative change?
We didn't get a legal opinion to that effect, but we did get comfort from private lawyers in the private sector that they thought that this was a workable solution.
But do courts have authority to appoint receivers for a municipal entity?
I believe they do, but we can definitely confirm that to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, we have to, there's only, Holly, you bring up an interesting question from, this has if you look across the country, this has happened. But the question, I think, may be more specific. Are there anything in Vermont statutes that prevent this? So I would put that as a subject to check.
Or more, I'm trying to get to the question of, it was raised, a question was raised. Normally you'd have receivership in a bankruptcy situation. And I don't know whether these municipal entities can go bankrupt or whether the bankruptcy court has jurisdiction over these municipal entities in a bankruptcy scenario. Just want to check that box before we pick this solution.
Sure. And I had thought the same, had some of the same concerns, but thought that courts can appoint receivers for a more broad category than just bankruptcy. So that's one reason that we thought that the receivership option could work, but we will definitely double check that.
Super.
While we're on this slide, I can just point out the language at the beginning of the provision that says the board shall establish standards for recouping the funds. And one concern that some VCUDA members raised was later on in the provision, it says if a grantee materially fails to comply with the terms, that there's nothing in the statute that builds out what a material failure of complying with the terms means. And that could cause some concern for potential, bond in the bond market. But the fact that the language here says the board shall establish standards, we believe that there doesn't need to be a fix in the legislation itself to talk about what material failure would be. The board could do that, and we should, in fact, look at developing policies to say what a material failure is. But that's something we can take up in the upcoming meetings and propose. But I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I had that very question. So Christine, if you would jot that down on a to-do list of our upcoming meetings that we have to make a policy definition of materiality.
I'll take this opportunity to note that the parking lot where that to do item belongs is not in
Yeah.
our agenda.
Yep, that's, yeah, we were supposed to have, I'm sorry, the parking lot should have came out with the board packet. So that may be it. Yeah, parking lot's on the agenda at 3:30.
Oh, sorry, I missed it myself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank God, because I was feeling so bad because I missed it several times, but so we got it. So I'll make sure to put that in the parking lot.
Yeah, at least it's all written down.
Yep.
Okay.
I just appreciate the fact that I need a to-do list to keep track of my to-do list. Christine.
I hear you on that.
The other place where in Act 71 that talks about reversion is in Section 7, which is dealing with fiber optic assets. And we proposed the same two types of reversions, but one to the state and one to the receiver. My preference would be that we should include the reversion to the receiver in both cases. I would point out that when Vacuda had staff had a meeting late Friday where they reviewed the proposal, and VCBB staff was able to attend part of that, or I was able to attend part of that, and Christine actually was able to attend the whole thing. And the Vacuda did not support the second change to Act 7, Section 7.
Stan, say that again. I'm lost. Vacuda did not support the receivership?
They didn't support any changes to Section 7. They believe it is fine as is.
Can you go back up in the slide?
Sure.
Yeah, to clarify that, I'm not sure we have any oars in the water on Section 7. Because, the two CUDs that ended up with the state assets don't necessarily see the need for a change. The problem that that we have as staff is that we come back to, this is a recommendation we're bringing back to the legislature. So we end up with an inconsistency. I'm not sure if that's a problem or not. We think it's a problem to go into the legislature with an inconsistency between how we handle one set of assets and another set of assets.
Oh, you have a question? Comment?
Yeah, I'm not really that interested in whether the CUDs are concerned about this, because I bet that they're relying on, take some comfort in the fact that this Section 7 is triggered by dissolution, which is a whole nother layer, right? So that's the inconsistency I believe you're talking about. But and I wonder myself whether we need to mess with that, so to speak, because dissolution is a pretty tough standard. This isn't likely to be triggered. But it also is more important to me that we have the input of people who are familiar with the bond market and the credit market, because that dissolution language might be meaningful to them.
Yeah, this language was, that's why we feel comfortable with this language. We've had it reviewed by professionals in the bond market, specifically the advisors to the EC Fiber bonding, out of Jim Anderson out of Colorado.
And I would actually go so far as to say you've already spoken in favor, Stan, of receivership. One of the things that's great about that is at a moment in time in the future, it allows a neutral third party to make a decision whether the best holder of the assets is the state or some other party that may not even exist at this point.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I just want to echo, Christine, what you said. I think whatever we do in the one section, we should do in the other. I don't think we should leave it untampered. So the section 7, I do think should be very, whatever we do, we end up doing similarly for section 7. I can be persuaded out of that for good cause, but at this point, I'm not hearing any reason not to do that.
Patty, there are members of the public who wish to speak if you're seeing those hands raised.
Yeah, why don't we do this? I'd like to get through this section at this point. We can take public comment on this. We're not taking action today, unless Christine, you're recommending action or anything?
Yeah, we would like a conditional resolution on this because we need to submit this to the legislature. We committed by the end of January or the end of January.
Okay.
Why
don't we do this? If we can get through, Stan, if you can go through the slide deck you have, then we'll do a brief public comment on this particular issue on the 2 sections that you've highlighted, section 7, and I can't see your other slide. So
Yeah, this is actually the last slide for the Act 71 proposal. So our recommendation is that the board approve recommending changes to both the provisions with the receivership options in the legislature.
okay.
And
Dan and Laura, do you have any feedback at this point? Question?
That I appreciate I am relying on staff's sense that this is necessary, and that if it for this year, and that if it is necessary for this year, their sense that it should be made known sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and in fact, I would recommend, making it conditional on staff investigating what Holly had mentioned in terms of the ability for the state.
Judiciary.
Say it again, Holly.
That we have to just confirm the authority of the state courts to appoint a receivership in this situation. That's all.
So if this is okay, then we'll check that before we submit it to the legislature and confirm that it is okay. If it's not, we'll be coming back to you.
But Laura raises a good point that if the funding, if going out to the bond market is not a 2022 objective, it may be more. Is that what you're saying, Laura? It might be better to address this at a later time.
So it would be more than 2022 because if we.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I believe any case we're planning to go to the bond market in 2022. So I think this is timely.
If you didn't go this year, the odds are good that when you went next year, that you would not have this available to you until June or July.
You are fading out, at least in my audio, Laura.
Jesus,
Sorry.
again. Sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now.
If you did not pass this, if this is necessary and we don't pass it this year, we would want to be planning that the earliest then would be for probably June or probably July of 2023. If we did not pass this year.
Yeah, and I misspoke. I don't think any case going until 23, but why don't we ask Krista when they plan on going to the bond market?
Okay, Dan, do you have any comments before we move to public comment?
No, I do not. Oh, Dan,
Okay.
sorry.
So I'm just wondering, should the board be making a recommendation, or should the staff be commenting on what the problems that we have, and then the legislature being looking for the experts in this area to solve the problem? It feels like the board shouldn't be actually doing that, and I guess maybe I look to Laura a little bit on this.
Laura, do you have any follow-up on Dan's suggestion?
Let me make sure that I'm clear. the question is whether or not the board should be making this recommendation.
Yeah, so so this recommendation comes from the board, but is that the board's position, or is this for the legislature to take action on a problem and then get input from experts who
Got it.
can solve the problem or chart a path towards something that's more functional in terms of the funding and follow-up?
So if you can hear me,
Ken.
I believe the legislature created this board to help the CUDs navigate the work of delivering universal service to all of their member towns and in a comprehensive way. And so I think the legislature has done a very large wrestle with with the overall policy. And so this is more, I would say, a detail. I think a recommendation from the board is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Laura, that we should make a recommendation, but Dan has a good point that if they being the legislature wants to take input from other experts, highly encourage them to reach out and do that. All right, let's open up for a few minutes, not more than 10 minutes of public comment on this specific issue of whether we.
Yeah, raise your hand if you want to be recognized.
I don't think Patty can see Holly.
Patty, can I make a quick comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can't see you, Holly. You're off my
quiet.
screen. You're off my screen, so I couldn't see you.
Yeah, I understand this so well. But in confirmation of what Laura said, but embellishment, section 8089 actually invites our board to make legislative proposals. And so this could just be considered an extension of our annual report in which we offer a specific starting point for this change.
Yep, Laura's got her hand up. Yep.
Patty, can you hear me? You're muted.
Yes, Laura, you're up, and I also just noticed that Brian's joined us. Welcome, Brian.
So the one thing I would note, Patty, is I think the legislature may just accept this, or they may want to take testimony. And so, speaking as a legislator who was, had a hand in devising this group, I would really be looking to fast track recommendations that came from this group, and not necessarily and I would presume that those had been pretty well vetted, which it sounds like this has been really well vetted. We've talked to the CUDs, we've talked to the bond agencies, our council has looked at it. So we're making this recommendation. And so I think the board should have that sense that when they make a recommendation that the legislature is going to, hopefully move that through fairly quickly. Of course, you always can get lots of questions or other things that are happening, which is a caution for making legislative requests. So I guess that's all I would say.
Okay, let's turn this, Christine or Krista, do you want to run the public comment section?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and run it. And Krista had her hand up earlier, so why don't we call on her first, and then it would be Will, followed by Irv, followed by Ann. Go ahead, Krista.
Hi, thanks. So the first thing is, the first question that I have is whether or not when you spoke to bond counsel, that you spoke to them specifically about section 7, whether or not in doing that you presented the signed contracts that have been executed to find out if those executed contracts represent a problem in the bond market.
No, we did not review executed contracts that
Okay.
that
So
the CUDs have done.
Okay. So the second question is the language in section 7 says, shall make part of the contracts transferring or something like that. I don't have it right up in front of me, sorry. And the, let's see, here it is. In addition, the transfer shall include a requirement that upon the dissolution of a communications union, any such fiber assets shall become the property of the state to be managed by the Department of Public Service. So the transfer is already complete. And so I'm not sure, what are we asking? Are we asking for an amendment to the contract that already exists between the state? The bill of sale is clean, right? The bill of sale, it references the transfer agreement, certainly, but the bill of sale is, these are your assets, you can do what you wish. In addition, the agreement itself states that this in no way impacts, nothing in this agreement shall be construed to limit or prevent assignee, its successors and assigns from using the transferred assets as collateral or for other lawful purposes associated with assignee's delivery of communication services within its service territory. And so my opinion is that that paragraph, along with a very clean bill of sale, and the fact that the transfer already exists.
Okay, Holly has her hand up, Patty.
Okay, Holly. You're muted,
You're
Holly.
on mute.
Chris, I have this question for you. Are you saying that the department's transfer of the assets does not comply with Section 7?
No, I don't understand why.
Well,
no, I'm saying that
it says that it has to have this language in it.
It does.
And it does have language about dissolution in it?
Yeah, it says transfer.
We don't have that contract in front of us, so we're really, this is like third hand. We don't understand the full impact and your point's well taken that the transfer has already happened. And I don't think there could be future assets that are subject to the Section 7 provision, right?
No.
No. So, maybe it's done and maybe we shouldn't mess with it. But I also wouldn't want somebody to come in and say that the contracts weren't properly formed because they didn't have Section 7 provisions in them.
Yeah, they do have Section 7 provisions in them.
Can you send that Section 7 language to Christine and Stan?
I'll just send the series of 3 contracts. There's a specific section in the transfer agreement that covers that.
Because if that were the case, Stan, I'm kind of inclined to agree with Krista that maybe we should leave it alone.
Yeah, based on the date limitation in Section 7, I see the point.
Okay. Is that all? And Krista, one more question. Are you going to the bond market in 2023?
So we have been advised by the bond market that it would make sense for us to go to the bond market as soon as we can, because the grant funds can be looked at as if they were basically equity. And so yes, the answer to your question is we intend to go to the bond market in 2023. I do not think there's any way that we'll be going to the bond market in 2022.
Thank you.
I mean, we'll start working on it for sure, but there's a lot to be done, right? So.
Right. Okay, next in line is Will Anderson.
Thank you, Christine. And I will try to be brief, considering I do have a slot on this meeting later on. So I'd just like to reiterate that yes, as Stan said, we did have a meeting of Vicuda stakeholders and decided decisively to support the change, allowing in bondholders, lien holders with receivership per option 2 of the first set of changes. And just to reiterate again, We did not support any change to Section 7, primarily based on the fact that there's already contracts in place for 2 CUDs that this would be counterintuitive for. So I hope that having those contracts as evidence into board staff will be supportive of the fact that no change is necessary for Section 7. The last thing I'd like to note is that I do have a Vermont statute in hand here that I believe qualifies municipalities for receivership. And I will send an email on to Holly and Christine and Stan that has that language and that information in it. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Next, Irv.
Thank you. The question came up whether this needs to be dealt with this year. From EC Fiber's perspective, I believe it does. We have bonds outstanding now, and we are likely to go to the bond market again this year. If there is a perceivable conflict between the terms of these grants and customary bond provisions, then we have a problem in seeking state and federal money flowing through the state and through the board to assist in building out the parts of our network that are new. So that's why I believe it's important that the legislature address this detail, at least the first part, this year. I'm agnostic on the subject of Section 7. I don't know enough about it. Thank you.
Thanks. Holly has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Holly.
I just want clarification. Did EC Fiber? We're getting feedback from somebody that more than one.
Yeah, Irv,
Thank you.
silence your mic. Hang on.
Irv.
There it is. Okay. I just wanted Irv to confirm that, or Christine, you probably know, is EC Fiber one of the CUDs that received an asset from the state? I believe it is.
I can't. I don't know that. I guess we'll ask EC Fiber to answer that question. Okay, next up we have Ann Manwaring.
I just want to point out that the specific conversation seems to be focused around the bond market and assets that had previously been owned by the state and transferred or will be transferred to municipal CUDs. I want to point out that there is going to be for funding to CUDs that probably long before we are eligible for the bond market to help us get funding for drops in lines that do not meet the requirements under ARPA. And that has to do with the definitions that go along with unserved and underserved. There's a lot of people that the public service department's definitions say are served that definitely are not. So there's a whole array of customers out there. And I cite specifically, for example, there's the an RCUD and others. There are the FCC. I lost the term here for a second here. We'll get back to that in a second. So the need to have this language comport with a broader range of funding sources other than the bond market is important. And secondly, to recognition that I'm sure we'll be back to this board with further discussions on about other funding opportunities to collect those addresses that don't technically meet the standard of unserved or underserved under the present rules and definitions. Thank you.
Thanks. Next we have Magna Dodge.
I think you may be on mute.
Am I unmuted now? Because I usually.
Yeah, you are, you're good.
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah, you're good now. Okay. Depending on where you are in the development of the CUD, some of us may need interim financing well before you get to the bond market. And so this really has to not just have a focus on the bond market, but also potentially the sources that Ann talked about, but also the bank market. And this change is important to the bank market, or at least to certain lenders in the bank market that I have spoken to.
Thanks, Mac.
Can I ask Meg a direct question?
Go ahead, Holly.
So Magna, do you, boy, I'm getting a lot of feedback here. I don't understand what's going on. Somebody else there.
Yeah, Irv's got his mic hanging out, silence.
Okay. Are we better? Okay, Magna, I'm sorry. Do you have any feedback about whether or not bank lending institutions or lending institutions would have a problem with this receivership language? It certainly, from my point of view, would represent an improvement.
They're fine with the receivership.
Thank you.
Proposal.
Okay, Irv has his hand up again. Thank you.
Is Irv muted?
I think I hang it. Let me unmute him. No, he's on. He's okay now. Go ahead, Irv. It looks like, does anybody see Irv?
Yeah, I just allowed his mic, but it's showing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You're good now.
Okay. Answering Holly's question, yes, EC Fiber did receive transfer of former VTA dark fiber assets. And I believe that transfer is entirely complete. I'm not in a position to answer any detailed questions about it. Sorry.
Okay, so I don't see any more hands up.
Okay, let's query the board here of thoughts and steps forward. So Stan, based on what you've heard, do you have any changes that you'd like to propose in the language, or you still would move forward with the language that you put in front of us?
I would still move forward with the language, the receivership language for the first section in 8086C. Probably not in section 7 based on the information that we received from Krista.
Okay, any comments, questions from the board? Does somebody want to put a motion on the table to at least approve that section as proposed? Holly?
I move we support and recommend staff's proposed language change to section 8086C that allows for receivership as a result of a CUD's failure to meet its financial obligations.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second the motion. Is there any further discussion? This is just the first part, 88.6, is it 6.6 or 6.3?
8086C.
Okay, Just for that section, not the section 7. Is there any more discussion? Right, all those in favor of the changes as proposed by Stan to that section 8086C, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So on the section 7, what are the next steps on that section?
We'll review the language, and if we believe that there are any changes that we needed to make, we'll come back to the board and request that.
Holly?
Patty, I made a mistake. We said we were going to make that recommendation subject to confirmation of judicial authority for receivership. While I greatly respect Will's competency, maybe it ought to be checked by legal staff. So Stan, if you don't mind confirming.
Absolutely, will do.
Thank you, Holly. Good point. Okay, we are wrapped up then, unless there's further discussion on this issue. Right, seeing no one raising their hand, let's move on.
All
Yep,
right.
all right. I can probably take the stand. I'm okay, I think. No, maybe I can't. Go ahead. You take it. Stan's going to put it up on his screen, a screen sharing for the NTIA. We'll start with the.
Oh, no, I still have some more legislative updates to run through. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Stan. Keep going.
The next bill I wanted to raise was the Senate 166, the cleanup for construction sites. And there was a hearing on Friday. Well, it was supposed to be on Friday about that, but it has been postponed until next week. Legislative staff has proposed some small changes to the bill that was originally proposed to move the language from one part of the statute 3.500 to 3.700, and let's see. There was one other small change. Oh, that rulemaking would not be necessary to enact the law, that it would be a statutory change. And it sounded to me like the staff of the Judiciary Committee is ready to go ahead and approve this, in which case it would then go to the Senate Finance Committee. Let's see.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Holly.
Why are we dealing with this when we had consensus as reported at our minutes that we're not getting involved in this provision? I don't even think we should be talking about it at our board.
Staff is not proposing anything. I was just providing an update on the.
Okay, I thought you actually had made a recommendation about the section changes.
No.
Thank you. Thank you.
I took you at your word last meeting. Thank you. The next bill that I wanted to
Before we go, Stan, Laura has her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Just confirming with that previous bill.
Yes.
So as these changes for Act 71 were places for the changes.
Oh, we lost you.
Can't hear you, Laura.
As we are looking for places for the Act 71 changes to move, this legislation is a place that may end up being a home for that, depending on what else is moving in the Senate.
Great.
I think for that reason, it's good for us to understand what this is doing.
Good point. Okay, Stan, you're up.
Next bill, Senate 222, which the governor signed last week, just makes all open meeting laws able to be done remotely through electronic means, so we don't have to have a physical location, and that does apply to the VCBB's meetings as well. So it will expire next January 15th.
Okay, and on that point, I would suggest we continue virtually until we all feel there's it's safe or there's a compelling reason to meet in person. At this point, with the coronavirus running rapid, I prefer to continue virtually. Okay, any other updates, Stan?
Senate 167 is a bill to modernize state telecom policy. That was introduced by Senator Randy Brock in January. The change would be to change the date from 2024 to 2029. He believes is a more realistic date to achieve that 100 speeds. This may also be a place to consider the Act 71 changes if it appears to be moving as well.
Okay, any discussion or comments on 167 or anything else that Stan updated us on? Laura?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I am clear. So we are actively working on getting Act 71 into something that is moving? Question mark?
Yes. Yes.
Who is leading on that? Is that you, Christine?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments and questions? Okay, is there anything else on legislative update, Christine or Stan?
I just wanted to mention that Christine attended a meeting with the House Energy and Technology Committee on Friday with our board member Sibilia as well. She did not speak because the focus was on the Public Service Department's proposal regarding cell towers, but the parties have been invited back later on in the session to discuss where I believe she will be talking about the budget and the VCBB's parts of the budget.
Okay. All right, Christine, anything else on legislative update?
Nope, that's good. Thanks, Stan.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item 4 on the agenda, update on Act 71 construction grant program RFP.
Let me try sharing. I think I got it. I think I got it, Stan. We'll see.
Okay.
Just hang on, I'm gonna bring it over. So can you see the text here?
Not yet.
Really? That's funny. Oh, let me try one more time. I mean, I'd give up yet.
I can see
Are
it.
you intending to show the NTIA?
Yeah,
discussion?
yeah.
Okay, so we're not on the RFP, right?
No, we're on the NTIA. I don't think I gave it enough time, but do you see the NTIA?
So Christine,
Yes.
we have on the agenda update of Act 71 construction program RFP. Do you want to?
Oh, I'm in the wrong place.
First?
I'm sorry.
wanna
Yeah,
take that
I'll stop sharing just to give you, that's a brief update on that one.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Basically, we had an application come in, a pre-application come in from Maple Broadband. There's a couple wording, a couple things that we had to work with the Maple, and they're coming back to us. So we, at this point in time, we don't have any applications that we're bringing forward to the board, any pre-applications. What in our process, we basically said, the staff would approve the pre-application and bring it to the board. We found a few problems with it. Maple's working through it, and I'm pretty confident they'll take care of it the next couple days.
Okay. Holly?
I think that we're on the item that happens at 12:40 though, right? The construction grant RFP.
That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, there's a whole segment of the package that's about the RFP for legal services, is that separate?
That's later. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all I have to report on the construction RFP.
Could I also mention, though, that we've now been talking about section, the policies that this body is supposed to create under section 8086C. And Stan, those policies might well belong in those construction grants. So I'm just alerting you that our parking lot list needs to correspond to the policies that we're supposed to develop, including material failure to comply. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, now let's move to item 5 on our agenda, which is review of the responses to the NTIA questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me see if, what do you see on your screen now?
There it is. You're good.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, so there's a lot of questions here, so I'll kind of, try to run through this in an hour. But certainly I'm not rushing you as a board, so, just stop me wherever. And if you look at our responses, they really group into certain areas. One is we're pushing the NTIA to show favoritism to community-owned infrastructure. Where you'll see us talk several times about the coordinating with other with the AOTs and pole owning entities to make a most efficient use of the funds. Avoid digging twice. We're talking about multi-tenant units having some kind of incentive to be able to change conduit. So you'll see later on we talk about the fact that while we expect the folks to pay for their connections, subject to whatever the CUD's set up for standards for those connections. In other words, pretty much standard in the industry is, they pay the first 400 feet of fiber is covered, but the conduit needs to be buried, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not going to mess with the standard industry provisions, but we do think that we need to set up funds for low-income families who live in multi-tenant buildings. You'll see that referred to a few times in order to get those buildings connected. And there's an interesting thing that we've learned, which I'll be talking about later from the work that we've done with outreach, like HUD and others, is that there's this. Sometimes landlords will make a single contract available for broadband, and they'll get a kickback. So the idea is they force their low-income tenants into high-cost programs, which profit the building owner. So we want to disallow that. We talk about providing hardware and co-working spaces. This comes out of Act 71. Some of the things the legislature asked us to look into. Hardware and training for low-income and elderly folks who may not, use the internet today, but are going to need that support. Doesn't necessarily mean we as a board are going to provide that. It just means we want the funding to be available to do that. So those are the answers for question 1. How would you like me to proceed, Patty? Shall I wait and see if we've got comments for each one of these sections from the board?
Patty, can I just ask Christine one question?
Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
This thing about the contracts between landlords and providers, I don't understand how NTIA would govern the contract rights of landlords. So it's a lofty goal. I'm not saying I'm not understanding why you might want it. Shall we leave it to NTIA to deal with the practicality issues? Or does it moot out your comment because it seems to lack a bit of, I'm worried that it sounds like it lacks understanding of the market.
Well, they asked for feedback, so we're giving them feedback, whether they can do anything about it, I have no idea. But if we can, if they can attach strings to it, sure, but I do not know the answer. We're basically providing feedback on the questions without necessarily filtering it.
All right.
So any other points on number one? Number two, we talk about, one of the things with the NTIA group is we have a state broadband leaders network and all 50 states meet at a time. We think we'd be better off having regional listening sessions. So there's not really much substance here to do stakeholder input other than saying maybe break it into smaller groups. So that's question two. Question three is about transparency and accountability. And this is where we're starting to getting into, this idea that, it's definitely largely recognized amongst the state broadband leaders that the way mapping is done today, that basically when, if a provider reports that somebody is served, then it ends up on the FCC map. What we're saying, what our recommendation from us here in Vermont is that we start developing some measures that show what connection is, not just the one time, we're getting 25.3. The idea is let's include some of these same numbers that are used by the electric regulation to say, let's start reporting on performance over time of these systems. And of course, the reason the telecom providers will fight that is because, the only technology that has the reliability to meet its high standards is fiber optic infrastructure, because essentially it's a welded cable, just like electric wires. So this will probably get fought, but we're saying that the performance requirements from the electric distribution system are a good model to follow, with the addition of latency monitoring and reporting. I particularly would like to hear from Dan and Brian what you think of this. Do they?
Yeah, I don't have strong
Opinions. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, having some sort of service quality metrics, et cetera, very good practice, of course. It's the reporting of it that's got to be done on a sane basis. You can't be asking for real time. I just don't think you can be asking for real time. And real time monitoring is for use of the network operator, not for a oversight agency. Oversight agencies are going to take a retrospective look. And to ask an operator to report real time, I think is just.
That's a good point. I guess that wasn't my intent.
It's overkill.
Yeah, it's you monitor it real time, report on a regular basis. We'll change that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And Christine, from being in the electric space, monthly may be overkill as well.
Yep.
So just check it for reasonableness and in terms of the average interruption and number of customers. What we measure too is not going to be the same as the electric space. Obviously, it's going to be compared to what would be considered normal telecom statistics. But somehow we're going to have to come up with what are reasonable numbers to compare the KD and the safety to.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think it's I think that would be the NTIA's job to figure that out, but I'll change the language so it basically says, yeah, they're compiling feedback from all kinds of folks. So I don't expect them to take this literally, but
Okay.
add that. So question 4, how is it used to complement other programs? We're encouraging the allowance of additional incentives for local investment, provide funding over the committed grant amount. So in other words, if you get local funding, it should go on top of the grant, not detract from the grant. And we're going to see this theme all throughout, that we think they should favor products that create a publicly owned asset. We think it should be 100 by 100. And we talk about the low income, covering the cost of low income again. So any questions or thoughts on 4? Question 5. Technical assistance state what kind of technical assistance we're saying, the best practices, share best practices, continue with the state broadband leaders network. I think the state broadband leaders are pretty happy with that. They're having regular meetings. We're actually on the agenda for this month to present what we're doing in Vermont with workforce development. Mm-hmm. Technical assistance to support performance reporting would be helpful. And new market entries. Any questions?
Yeah, Christina, number 5, when I was reviewing it, one thing that came to mind was Chris Recchia's comment about, learning from past mistakes in terms of how to build more efficiently. Any best practice information in terms of build out, I think should be added to that list too.
Okay, got it. Okay. Number 6. This is about subawards. This apply directly to us, but again, we say favorably owned infrastructure. We're saying that they should allow us to set state standards that are higher than theirs. And we're also saying that, entities that provided under ARPA should be presumed eligible. We're particularly talking about the fact that we've got these programs in place now. Any questions on 6? Partnering opportunities, we have a lot to say about that, but we think it should be a substantial private match from the incumbent recipients. Again, favor projects with public infrastructure 100 by 100. We're saying your work with the DOE to provide incentives for the electric utilities to develop smart grid infrastructures, coordination and decarbonization of the electric grid, coordination with smart transportation systems. And then this other one's interesting for Vermont too, because the few meetings I've had with the agri-food markets within ACCD, they recognize that we could provide some opportunity to the farms around here to optimize their production through the use of data. Any questions on 7? Overcoming barriers to broadband. Probably no surprise here but we're also introducing that, and there's a bullet 3 This is a popular bullet within the states to allow other federal matching funds to be used by community-owned networks. There continues to be talk at times about requiring matching funds. The Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program is going to allow ARPA grants to be used as a match at this point, I believe. We're saying allow overbuilding of any project that previously received federal funding but has not achieved its speed requirements. That's been a problem here in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on 8? Number 9. When we talk about matching funds, the rule should not apply to community-owned networks. Community-owned networks should be evaluated on their business plans and funding direct to serve the lower density. Publicly owned infrastructure should be exempt from this match. Now we get into some of the labor and material issues. This is specific. We're allow and ease regulatory barriers to guest worker programs that will allow the importing of out-of-state and out-of-country labor. We're working on that now with our congressional delegation, but we want the NTI to recognize that we're going to have labor shortages in the short term. Allow for exemptions to Buy American if such a result would have cost increase of more than 35% or delays in excess of 6 months. So any issues with those 2 bullets? Number 11, allow pay it forward programs that allow workers to earn while they learn. Again, the repeat of the material lead time issues. Again, this goes to reliability of service. We're talking about these measures again. Don't know what they should be, but they definitely think they should be there.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are we consulting with the departments, the Consumer
Yes.
Protection
Yes.
Division on this?
Yep. I actually spoke with June this morning on this. She's reviewing this as well this week.
Okay.
So we won't submit it to the NTIA until we've
And
come to an agreement.
if I might, Patty, just another kind of side question, which is, do we have any connections to the Attorney General's office, to any of the attorneys at the Attorney General's office?
Stan, you've been talking to the Attorney General's office, right?
I've talked to folks in the Attorney General's office about in public records requests and open access to information questions. So I have contacts who work in that area.
Okay. Because this is really a consumer protection kind of piece where we would see this be something that was. That's it. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Another point here is we're talking about submission of speed data, the requirement that we get some honest speed data, penalties that networks they don't reach the speeds, and progress payments based on meeting performance. I threw out some numbers here for which, there's they're what should be these numbers can be achieved with fiber optic networks. They can't be achieved with the other technologies. But again,
And Christine, are these based on, what are these based on? The 5 hours, the 3 hours, and the 15?
They're based on good network performance using fiber optic. None of the other networks, none of the other types of networks can meet these standards. That's the intent here.
So does that also factor in any storm issues?
Oh yeah, I should add that. Thank you. I will add that. No, it doesn't. This should be
Okay.
absent storm, right? Absent force majeure. Yep.
Okay, that's important.
That is important. Okay, 14.
Before we leave that one, I'm assuming that's absent force majeure events and also regular maintenance, or
Yeah, planned maintenance, force majeure, right? Those should be taken. Those should not be counted against. Although planned maintenance, you ought to be able to plan maintenance. You shouldn't have to take down a network for planned maintenance, but that's for now, let's.
Okay, whatever the industry standards are currently for those entities that have fiber already, we should pick those up in terms of what the performance measures are and use their statistics.
Well, there is no industry standard, but there are performance measures that the system is capable of. What we're recommending is they develop an industry standard.
Okay, but if we're going to make recommendations in terms of speed and specific numbers, I just hope that they're based on something. Because if the NTIA takes it, then we could be stuck with some data points that aren't realistic or maybe just completely too low.
Well, I'll be glad to add a caveat here that you shouldn't take this literally. I don't think we will. It's considering they're probably not going to end up getting in there anyhow, because the telecom providers are going to fight it. So, but yes,
Don't give up, start, Steve.
What's that?
Don't give up before we start.
Yeah, I'm thinking I added some language there that, these are recommended measures. These are recommended measures. Clearly, the NTIA really needs to do some research and come up with industry standards. Basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 14. What should they do to provide sustainable service? It goes back to the same thing, develop standards. But we also introduced that requiring a plan for universal service. We want them to acknowledge that the cost per address is not the only metric to review, because there are other factors that, of course, we're experiencing right here in Vermont as a result of cherry picking. It's going to be harder to serve those rural areas and more expensive. So we want them to recognize that. And we talk about the high cost fund to serve low income addresses. Any questions on that? We're about halfway through, so how am I doing?
Doing great.
What sort of speeds, latency, so now this NTIA should consider the following requirement: only fund fiber to the premise networks. Fiber optics are the only, are now well below any other technology in terms of life cycle costs. That comes right out of our 10-year telecom plan. And those networks are the only technology that'll provide reliable service. So we're saying just fund fiber networks. Keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
And this gets to the FCC maps. What risks should be mitigated in these areas that are considered served? We should say they should only be accepted from overbuild if they're fully funded and engineered. Whole application been filed. Speeds are provided at least 100 by 100. In that case, only incidental overbuild should be allowed. We're talking about additional funding to get to those donut holes of unserved addresses that are difficult to reach. Should consider project areas that do not meet previously stated criteria only if the speed exceeds the original project. So in other words, we don't want them funding projects that aren't superior to the existing networks. In all cases, incidental overbuild should be allowed. Any questions on 16? So they are setting aside funds for high cost areas. So the NTI has already recognized that these high cost areas exist. So when we talk about determining high cost areas, we talk about mobile home parks again. We talk that are reached by conduit. We talk about when they allow wireless solution, this is really a mountain area issue, but topography should be considered as high cost. Should be considered high cost. You know, so the NTA should allow wireless solutions in which the only service can be provided by fiber. Wait a second, what am I doing here?
I have a question on this one when you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead. I question it too.
I see your statement as about wireless solutions is very non-committal, and
Yes,
thought
yes.
that you should actually be a proponent that that other means should be other means of service should be determined to be unattainable or high cost before wireless is considered a an option. I'm not stating this in the way that you could quote it, but I am sort of saying that the high cost areas should be determined without wireless as the alternative, because then you can always make an argument that wireless is cheaper, and you can exclude whole areas for high cost service based on the idea, well, we'll just go to wireless.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly why I was stumbling on that. And Stan and Rob and I will work on that section to just as you said. Got that, Stan? Do you understand what we're struggling with here, Holly and I?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. Just checking because I think I got it too, but well, there's two of us have it. Number of miles required to access the unserved should be considered, and set the benchmarks based on entire network all-in costs, including the drop to the premise. Because you know, with these benchmarks, when we talk about pricing, we want to include the drops to the premise. So that's all part of the network cost. 18. They want to know what other funds should be allowed with the broadband access and deployment program, which is part of the IIJA. Should deem the following eligible: workforce development, pre-purchasing, require a minimum amount of spare fiber for future growth, and coordination between agencies.
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this is the place, but there's two initiatives that I think are important. One is digital education and digital literacy, including consumer economic education. And what I'm getting to here is the affordability options of those who are low-income families, and the permission within this legislation to use funds for programs that supplement federal ACP subsidies. So it speaks of affordability, but when you're talking about the cost of service in rural areas, low density areas, you cannot assume that the $30 a month offered by the ACP is adequate subsidy to make service affordable for low income families. So whether that comment comes in here as part of a broadband adoption program, or whether it comes into the next one in terms of eliminating barriers, I think the alternative for creating affordability programs to supplement ACP should be included in our NTIA comments.
Okay, yeah, there are probably multiple locations for that, and we'll be glad to include that. Yeah, so there's the barriers question, and that is another good place to put what you just said as far as supplemental funding for low income. So again, we're saying only community-owned networks. I'm sure that's not going to make final cut. Require universal service plans that could make final cut. Allow communities to veto certain technologies that probably won't make final cut. And require providers to hold public meetings and impact units to submit to a public oversight process. Okay, question 20. Following groups should be considered in state broadband plans. Coordination with the agencies, we talked about that. Working with the anchors. Is there a question?
Yeah. Previous question.
Yep.
Universal service plan, best of my knowledge, is a Vermont term. Should we add some more definition?
Sure, we can do that. Hang on, I'm taking notes here. So we'll define universal service plans.
Well,
And
I noticed
that's because the Universal Service Fund is a federal fund, and we have a Vermont Universal Service Fund. And then we have created in Act 71 Universal Service Plans. That is why I'm suggesting that we add some definition there and not leave that open to interpretation.
Okay.
Good point, Laura.
And do I understand, Laura, that your recommendation would be that applicants show their intention and plan to provide service to all locations, E911 locations?
Yes.
That would be 911 locations located on the grid? Question mark?
It is in my world.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you also have to give them a territorial, they don't have CUDs in NTIA world. So you all are going to have to recommend what a plan is and what the respective territory is that applies.
Yes.
So, I mean, we are recommending that there only be funding for community-owned networks, or that those are prioritized. And so let's say that they were not prioritized. And so what would we be requiring? So we would be saying, if you are funding anybody, not just community-owned networks, require them to have a universal service plan. So 100% in a defined, in the grant applicant territory.
Service territory?
Well, I don't know if it's service territory, because if they're applying, Yeah.
It's just when you say territory, I'm just trying to figure that out, Laura, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can figure it out here, but certainly maybe, I don't know what we would do in that case. Could be a town by town approach. It's a challenge to think about how we do that in the existing FCC world.
Well, RDOF uses consensus blocks or census blocks, right?
Yes, yeah.
At a minimum, that would be a common denominator.
Yep, there you go. That's good. Okay, thank you.
So, universal service plans for community-owned networks or census.
Yeah, census block areas, right?
Okay,
right.
Great. Thank you.
Hang on, I'm catching this in notes. Okay, thanks. 20. Following agencies should be considered in broadband. This is where we talked about working with anchor institutions, cross-agency, municipal municipal authorities, electric, anchor institution, private, require all telecommunication network providers and electric utilities. Oh, this is bullet 4 will probably not get adopted, but we'd like it to. And there's a pretty strong consensus across the state broadband leaders network that we'd like this. But we would like to require all existing telecom network providers and electric utilities to make GIS files of their existing and planned networks public.
So Christine, I'd like to make this comment. You've made several side commentaries about provisions in this document that you don't expect to be accepted. That either tells me that you're getting input from third parties of things that you don't believe in, or you're already not ready to go to bat for these provisions. So from my point of view, it would be helpful if you not put in things to this document that come from outside that you don't think have a prayer. Or that you don't create a public record that suggests you're not fully in support.
Thank you. No, I think we should fight hard for these. It's just, knowing the national lobbying efforts that go on. I think back of the, Telecom Act of 2004 or whatever.
I am offering that comment as a means of support to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hear you. Thank you for the advice. Let's see. 22. How should NTI determine an eligible subscriber? We think the community action agencies are the best place to do this. We would not want to see the CUDs have to figure out who eligible subscribers are. And there is, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I have, unless you've talked to the community action agencies and you have verification that they are ready to do this work, our experience is that they are not. Our experience at this moment, I'm talking from the point of view of equal access to broadband. So I don't think it's appropriate that, I don't even know if NTIA knows what a community action agency is. I assume that they do because they are created under federal law, but it's not our bailiwick to assign work to the social services sector. So I think that NTIA should require coordination with those who support low-income families on a state-by-state basis to determine eligibility. Eligible subscriber here is actually, I don't know if, I haven't read BIL 60102H5A. So pardon me if I'm not using the terms interchangeably, but I think that you're really looking for who's qualified for a subsidy, correct? And that should
That's
not,
right. I like it.
yeah. I think the need to have coordination with the social services sector is important, and to make that determination on a state-by-state basis is important. For all I know, the Department of Public Service should be doing this, but the fact of the matter is we should not be putting it onto a social services agency, an obligation onto them, unless you have full buy-in.
No, I don't. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. We will rewrite that. Very helpful. So second bullet, I think probably stands okay. State agency should be responsible for ensuring the funds properly transmitted to telecom. Third bullet, following Holly, should third bullet be deleted as well? Should we not be going there?
I think it actually is okay, because eligibility, these are existing programs and they can be used for alignment. They are today being used by USAC in their administration and in the existing EBB program. So eligibility aligned. The question is, should there be other grounds, or should it be, or as determined on a state-by-state basis?
All right, I'll add that. Thanks. Okay. Next, 23. NTI should consider the following: low-cost service. We'd like to see them create a 0% loan fund. We think that investor-owned television shouldn't be profiting on basic broadband service. Should come back from other services. That way we can ensure low-cost plans. And this gets, the grant recipients have a low-cost option that's specifically designed for those who qualify under hardship. At $30 a month, it's interesting, because if people can't afford to connect, that $30 a month just becomes additional revenue. So I'm not sure why a provider would fight this.
You just broke up, and could you just restate that?
Yeah. So what we're saying here is,
could you just literally could you just literally restate what you just said? Because in my recording anyway, I could not. Your sentence broke up.
I'm not sure exactly what I just said, but what I'm trying to say here is that this low-cost option, $30 a month, is designed for people who qualify under hardship. Those income challenges users can't afford to connect anyhow, so it becomes additional revenue. So it seems like the telecom provider should provide a $30 a month option.
Oh, okay, I am going to comment now, if I may, Patty.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it isn't like it's a wash, Christine. It costs something to connect those people. It costs something to build those people. For the CUD or its operator to file for the reimbursements costs a substantial amount of effort. And so you are creating operational burden that isn't covered by revenue. And you're also prescribing for the CUDs that they have this option available, whether or not they agree or can determine that that is their rock bottom price. So I feel it's very prescriptive for us to be putting that forward. And by the way, I think that even Comcast charges $10 a month for its de minimis subscribers. I mean, de minimis rate subscribers. So you're actually asking the grant recipients to undercut the lowest market price available.
Okay.
I hope other board members agree with that, but
It feels too prescriptive to me too, Holly. And on the
Yeah, I'm
second,
happy.
the second bullet point, the first sentence just pops out at me. But, you know, I don't know how others feel, but investor-owned telecommunication companies should be prohibited from profiting on basic broadband service. Like, that just, why would we ever say that?
Well,
What's the value in saying that? I don't care
Um,
philosophically if you know what your position on is on it, but why would we ever say that?
I'm not feeling any,
Good. Get rid of it, please.
get rid of it. I'm happy to get rid of those 2 bullets.
Good.
Yep. I'm not feeling any strong ownership on many of these, so I definitely want the board to be putting your fingerprint on this. Affordability is key objective. Only fund community-owned networks, or in the alternative, at least provide incentives for community-owned networks. Only fund fiber networks. Others too expensive over time. Disallow teaser rates. This was disallow requirements to purchase other bundled services. And then we talk about the 0% load fund. And there's that bullet. We'll delete that last bullet under advice. Any comments on this section?
Yeah, what's wrong with teaser rates, especially if it's not for, you know, low income?
Well, so the CUDs generally are opposed to these teaser rates as well. And the idea is that, you know, it sucks people into a contract period. So
Yep.
it eliminates that whole kind of goes against the grain of quote, open access.
so there's a lot of work going on at the FCC about consumer disclosure statements. Is that not a way to solve this problem?
Yeah, that sounds better to me.
Sure, as long as people read them and don't say accept. But if it's, yeah, if you think that I should delete that bullet, happy to. Any other thoughts from board members before I strike that?
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind the disallowed teaser rates. I just want to make it clear that I don't mind it. I'm just saying that this is being addressed at the FCC in this other way.
Or maybe just position it that way in terms of, you know, teaser rates should come with, you know, very clear disclosures, you know, blah, 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 as currently being, you know, discussed at the FCC.
Okay. I will change it to the very clear disclosure. Probably hear like the drug ads, right? These programs, blah, blah, blah. Yep.
Your bias is showing, Christine.
Oh, it's funny because those, I think those clarifications are really important. So I actually think it works. Personally, that's my bias. But.
Patty, I'm just noting that Roger Nishi has raised his hand.
Okay, I want to have Christine get through this, and what we can do is take comments in the public comment period from anybody.
Yeah, we're cranking to the end here, so we're
okay.
So around you know, one of the best practice building digital equity plans, extensive stakeholder engagement, allow libraries to directly to become digital literacy and access hubs, integrate digital literacy into school curricula. Any comments on these?
I would urge you to expand on what digital literacy means to include its economics.
Yep, I will. In fact, we'll explain what that term means from our perspective to include economics, okay? Okay. Some states will benefit from technical assistance preparing digital equity plans. What kind of support are they needed? The only thing we said is, provide GIS map overlays for demographic information such as income-free and reduced eligibility, energy and transportation burdens. Not sure with our discussion if this makes sense, because if we're working with the qualified agencies, it gets down to who's going to do this. If we're working with the qualified agencies, they should have this information, correct?
I don't know who you mean by qualified agencies in this scenario.
Well, I'll harken back to our earlier discussion where we talked about, we're some agency, it doesn't necessarily need to be the CUDs, needs this information. I guess that if I say that bullet holds. We're not saying, yeah, I guess this one's fine. Anybody have a problem with the statement? Hearing none. So here we're saying only allow one and fund one equity plan per state. As part of the grant criteria, the plan should be coordinated with other agencies and kind of list of the agencies. Work with healthcare providers to identify healthcare needs. Work with schools, require states or create process to sign up for the ACA when applying for benefits, or automatically sign up those beneficiaries of the program.
Has our state equity officer looked at that response?
I don't think we have a state equity officer.
Yes, we do.
We do?
We might not be calling her that, but her name is, I think, Susanna.
Davis.
Somebody help me here.
Davis.
And I think that the way that question is answered goes only to one kind of equity, and that is financial. So before we speak as a state, I would highly recommend that you ask her if only one plan developed by these agencies would support her concept of equity, digital equity.
Okay, we will do that. So this really negates 28. We actually have a digital equity office in the state, correct? Is that what Susanna is?
I think you should check that out.
All right. Yeah. All right, I'll check this whole thing out with Susanna. I didn't even know that person existed, so I'll reach out to her.
She's a gubernatorial appointee.
Okay. That will be an action item.
And definitely not just digital equity. She is the diversity and inclusion, I think, is her department or agency.
Is she,
but a good person to check with, I think. Yeah,
and the question is, are they willing to take on the digital equity role? There's funding in the broadband, the IIJA for digital equity, and it's an important part of the IIJA, the bill. So I will review this all with her. Thank you. So measurable, NTI should consider following: digital equity funding should be prioritized, ubiquitous construction fiber to the premise, technology future-proof, adopt the cyber. So this is a new evolution coming from the NTIA. They're going to focus on cybersecurity model. So that model kind of already exists. Encourage development agencies state that are specifically committed to digital equity.
You want them to create another agency?
No, I didn't know one existed.
Well, except you're saying that this is a separate agency for digital equity. And I just guess maybe it's an office that brings light on this issue, but one wonders whether that isn't already baked into some of the other agencies that we have, including Susanna Davis's initiative.
Right. So that means change that sentence.
That means I wouldn't ask the federal government to create another agency in the state.
Okay, how about deleting that bullet?
I love that idea.
Okay, coordination requirements. Encourage, no, this is all part of the same thing. We'll change all this. Encourage, here it is again, Holly. So I got it. There it is again. All right. I stand corrected on all that. So now we're in the middle mile stuff. We're almost done, folks. So the middle mile program, it's a separate fund. It's a separate pot of money within the IIJA, sorry. So we're saying the NTI should propose the following requirements for middle mile projects. They be publicly owned and or provide at cost access, least cost access. That should be establish reporting requirements and monitor bulk data costs by region. Require coordination of middle miles, follow geographic redundancy connection with adjacent.
So, yeah, I would love to see a period after publicly owned.
Yeah, okay, you would like me to strike the rest of, I like that. Any other comments from the board on that, or shall I just go with it? Put a period after publicly owned.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on that question?
I mean, we look at previously public funded middle mile fiber that is here now that is not actually affordably accessed by public entities. So, and for which, a lot of profit has been made off of because it could, all legal. So, these public funds really need to be leveraged to the public good, because previous work of funding middle mile that is now privately owned has not gotten the job done. That's my case for the period.
Well, you certainly won't get the argument from staff on that.
But the experience of Vermont in that result would be appropriate to include in the statement.
Okay. I could do that. Okay. Include next 33. Require.
You took your screen down, didn't you? No. There it is. Sorry, my fault.
Okay. Require all middle mile existing and planned networks to be publicly share their GIS inventory files. Of course, if they're publicly owned, that's not a problem, right? Require middle mile to be publicly owned. Require adequate spare fiber for future growth. $34. NTI should impose the following requirements for middle mile projects. Interconnection with other networks, that's kind of a drops at key road crossing, drops at anchor institutions. how can the middle mile infrastructure program leverage existing middle mile facilities? Construction plans should be coordinated. I talk about the two largest electric. They want an example too, by the way. Are there any examples of successful deployments and or benefits provided by non-traditional providers to highlight? So, you know, the first bullet answers the top part. The second bullet, I wanted to point out what the electric utilities have done. Okay, I think we're at our last question. What scalability requirements should be in place? Incremental fiber costs during construction are insignificant in terms of overall project costs. Middle mile infrastructure should have an ample number of spare tubes available for future growth. So thank you for your input on that. We will make the changes. It needs to be submitted by February 4th. So what we'll do is we'll make our changes. We'll send you all out a copy, but we'll meet with, we'll incorporate those changes working with June.
So
just for clarity, just for 1 second, Laura, just for clarity, Christine, these are going under June's name. Are you signing as well?
Yes, I'm signing as well. Yeah,
okay.
I think there's a signature place for me down here. There it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Just curious. Laura, do you have a comment? Here we go.
Yes, and it was going to be around how any differences of opinion in the board and the department related to suggestions will be resolved.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I did.
So we've made some proposed changes here.
Right.
It is possible that the department would not concur. How will that be resolved?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose what I would recommend is that we put both comments in there and talk about the disagreement.
Since you have a deadline for filing, why wouldn't you just file separately?
I'm not sure why this is set up the way it is, but that would
what I would suggest is, you know, check it with June. If there's no disagreements, file jointly. If you've got tremendous disagreements, then we can file separately. But I see it's highly unlikely June's going to oppose our edits, in my opinion. And if we do have something big, we just file separately.
Okay.
That works for me.
Yep. We can work with that.
And Stan, if you're drafting this, one way to do that is to just, instead of restating everything we agree with the department on, draft a general concurrence and then state your exceptions.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay, are we all wrapped up on the NTIA questions?
Yep, I think. Did you want to take, I'm stopped the sharing, and did you want to take any public input at this point, or did you want to keep moving?
Let's keep moving, and we can take public input at 3:20 during the public input section. We will take notes of any comments relative to the NTI questions.
Great.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have an overview of the regulatory requirements, FCC E911 for CUDs.
Excellent. Stan will take that, and I'll point out that we're right on time. I was afraid we wouldn't be after that, but thank you for your efficient.
Thanks for your work on that, Christine.
Yeah, sure.
All right, can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had some talks with folks from the CUDs and have been learning some of the complex requirements that they are, some have complied with and some will need to comply with as they become operational. And just wanted to go through some of those to give you a flavor of the complexities involved. And should make a disclaimer that I'm not, my background is not in communications law, so I'm not an expert in any way in this field. I just know enough to be dangerous and to know that this is complex stuff. So. That, you know, obviously the CUDs are wanting to apply for federal grants through many programs that we've discussed here, including RDOF and ARPA and the IIJA and the state requirements. And they're regulated by the FCC, especially you know, in various ways. But if they offer a telephone service, there are even more requirements. And in addition, they're state municipalities and have to comply with many state requirements. So some of the FCC requirements that they have to meet are filing as an ISP or a municipal ISP. There are different categories. And whether they're considered to be operating, even if they hire a service provider in the district, they sometimes are considered the operator of that. And there are various forms that they have to fill out as the operating ISP. They also have to obtain various you know, login accounts and be conversant in different systems, including the FCC login, and they have to get a SAM number for grant applications and an EIN, a DUNS number, and a number for the USAC for their ACP payments. In addition, they have to make various quarterly and yearly filings, including forms 475 and 499, and E911 filings, E-rate filings, ESAC, ETC, which is not et cetera, it's and broadband mapping filings. There are requirements to have various policies or to file with the FCC those policies, including subscriber agreements, a privacy policy, procedures for CPNI, customer proprietary network information, digital copyright, and other customer-facing policies. In addition, there are state requirements that I mentioned. They have to register you know, their name, and because they are a municipality, there has been difficulty registering with the Secretary of State. So there's a system to navigate to do that. And there are various reporting requirements, you know, with the PSD and with other state agencies about where they're operating, how many customers they have, speeds, the universal service fee, and E911. So this just gives a flavor for the complexities involved and the regulatory hoops that they have to jump through. As we know, they're thinly staffed, many with volunteers and with many without a staff at all. So that flows into the next topic. I'll just wrap up there and see if there are any questions on this brief overview.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to add that, you know, we are working with the CUDs. You know, this really gets down to, do you have the administrative staff in place to carry these things out, which is going to be, you know, an important part of the discussion as they put their business plans together.
Holly.
Thanks, Patty. So, Stan, welcome to the world of telecom. Good for you. You know, waltzed around the neighborhood and lived to tell the tale, and that's great. And you're acquiring a sense for both how complex it is and what it is. So good for you, and thank you. I'm in real support of there being legal services made available to our CUDs. And I believe that this master contract format is a viable vehicle for doing that. I think that there's language issues in the RFPs as drafted. So I'd love to either bore the board with some of those comments, or be authorized to work with you directly on how to clean some of that up.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think we would welcome your help, of course. And,
absolutely.
and that ties in, it really ties in with our next bullet too, around getting the regulatory assistance and the contract negotiation support for these CUDs, rather than having them go out and have to each one get them separate. But it does tie exactly to what you're talking about, Holly, is to get this, tightened up.
Well, one of the things I'd bring to the board's attention is that not only might CUDs benefit from some contract negotiation support. So there's two different topics, very different topics on the table. One is contract support and the other is regulatory review. And the contract support is something that the horse is out of the barn in a lot of our organizations. And so I don't think that the VCBB intends to get in the middle of CUDs in their existing legal counsel's relationship at all. However, we may like to have a direct relationship with a contract services provider, because we're going to be developing, we are obligated to develop policies that may not be incorporated into the existing contracts of the CUDs. And it might be helpful for us to have legal representation on that who can talk to CUD's counsel. So that's even beyond what was anticipated by this RFP. So there's that one piece is, rather than Stan reviewing all the CUDs to make sure that they're in compliance with our Act 71 obligations, we could in fact farm that out, which in my mind would make a lot of sense. Thank you, Stan, for nodding. The second part is that CUDs could use the support of an experienced lawyer who develops expertise in negotiating on behalf of CUDs in this area with commercial counsel and with vendors. And so this master agreement provides us the opportunity to supply that kind of aggregated service, which is one of the things that Act 71 speaks to. So that seems like a good idea to me. And then I believe that it only makes sense for there to be one source of regulatory review and assistance, because it's extremely expensive. And that would be something that the VCBB can offer that would be really cost effective for CUDs.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, there are two different RFPs out that were proposed in the packet. And one was focused more on contract negotiations that the CUDs have with potential ISPs. And the other is the regulatory guidance and support that,
Stan, some of the language from the regulatory RFP got left into the contract RFP.
Okay.
And so there's a little cleanup there. And I'm actually proposing that we expand it one more step on the contract RFP to include advice and counsel to the VCBB.
To the board itself. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Any other comments?
Feedback. That's good feedback, Holly. I'm going to defer to Christine and Stan to sort through and choose what you want to do from a kind of staffing perspective on this. I don't want to noodle in on that, micromanage that piece. I'm just going to defer to you guys to figure out what you want to outsource and what you don't want to.
I would offer, Patty, that Rob Fish reached out to me while I was on an overnight plane coming home from San Francisco. And so I didn't get my homework done in time. So there's been an offer. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm still willing to help.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
if you would maybe just make an official statement with the board that Holly can help us with this, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I authorize Holly to help out staff where it's requested in this issue. How's that? I'm gonna make it general and open.
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
As far as those two contract positions, what's the will of the board on that?
Can you be really specific on which contract positions?
Those are the regulatory attorney and the contract attorney, two separate attorneys we would like to go hire out under contract.
Yeah, what I was trying to say earlier, Christine, is I'm going to defer to you to make that decision. I don't think you need to consult with the board on that. That's like an internal staffing issue. We have funds, we have legal funds dedicated for extra help, and you guys sort through when you need extra help.
Yep, okay, good. And we'll feel comfortable with Holly helping us on that. Thank you, Holly.
Exactly. Laura?
Patty, yeah, just confirming for myself that those are contract positions and not full-time staff that were.
Correct.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Great.
As long as you stay within the budget.
Oh yeah, that's
you're exactly. You've already have authority within the budget, so go forth and manage that.
Patty, may I again just offer another comment? And also just making sure that while we are doing this, we are doing everything we can so that this this additional capacity is being received and experienced as assistance.
Yes.
As opposed to oppression, which is,
exactly.
It's a point of view, but, just definitely listening to CUDs and having them participate in.
We'll avoid the oppression.
Yeah, and the check for that is regularly check-ins with the CUDs. It's nice to have Will there to check in, but we definitely, as we followed the practice with this Act 71 revision, we rely heavily on feedback from the CUDs. Although a lot of times the CUDs have varying opinions, we get there in the end.
Okay, are we wrapped up on this item?
Yes, I think we are. You all set, Stan? We got enough guidance?
I am all set. Thank you.
So I did hear, Christine, that your question was not that the board approves these RFPs, but that the board, that Penny was clear that the board authorizes staff to proceed with these RFPs.
Yes, and we're going to work. We'll work with you, Holly, to get some of the language corrected. Change, make the most effective RFP we can.
Okay, so are we on to staff updates, Christine?
Yep, we're on to staff updates. So, workforce development continues to move forward. We're working with the Vermont Business Roundtable is applying for a Good Jobs Challenge grant. They're including the fiber technician workforce career development side of fiber technicians as part of that grant. Vermont Business Roundtable, the USDA has a Good Jobs Challenge grant, and we're focused on getting our fiber technicians and that whole career path for the fiber technician. We we've got training set up for fiber technicians in March, April, and May. It looks like, at 1 week out from when we released the availability of the March program, it got oversubscribed. So we're happy with the fact that we're getting demand. But we know that we're not, we believe we're not going to get enough to fill all of our needs. So that's why we want to work cooperatively with the Department of Labor, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and the Vermont Business Roundtable is applying for a Good Jobs Challenge grant in conjunction with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So we're happy that we're meeting our needs in that grant. We're also, as far as filling our immediate needs, we're working with the Communication Workers of America. We've had several meetings with the CWA. What they're telling us is there are people in retirement who were retired early from Fairpoint in that still want to work. So they can't go back and work for Consolidated because of the agreement, but these are pretty talented and skilled technicians. So we're working with the CWA, and we also are working I've also reached out to Canadian contractors for the summer as well. And we're working with the congressional delegation in Washington to figure out how to make it easier to bring in Canadian workers this summer. So that's on the workforce development side. GIS project is up and running. Alyssa's doing a superb job of running that project. We've reached out to the AOT. We're working to determine how to roll into the AOT schedules to take advantage of when they're digging the roads to get conduit buried. So that's our update, and I'm sure the rest of the board has heard. I'm sure that the COD got a note that, but the reason Rob's not here is his father passed away suddenly yesterday. Anything else, Rob or Stan?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Okay.
I had a question about.
Laura has a comment.
I'm sorry.
Laura had a comment.
Yes, Patty. I'm just wondering if the board can authorize Christine to take some action to offer our condolences to Rob and his family via food or some sort of memorial.
That was going to be my comment as well. Thank you, Laura. And I also would ask everyone on this phone to lay off emails to Rob for at least a week. He has a tendency to track emails at any time of the night or day, all the time, everywhere. In fact, I inadvertently did that last night at midnight, and he answered me. So my public apologies to Rob, but I urge everyone to refrain as you can.
Thank you, Holly. That was very good advice. And I
think it's a great recommendation from Laura and Holly to send Rob and his family something on behalf of the board.
I will do that. And my message to all the CODs is if you have any burning issues, send that email directly to me. I'll respond as quickly as my commitment is to respond as quickly as Rob does on those. So I'll be paying close attention, and you can text me as well.
You won't be sleeping.
I can handle it for a week, I think. So that's all I have.
Okay. So we are done with staff updates, and that brings Will for VCUDA updates.
Thank you. Very productive meeting today. So glad for all the work that the board has done on behalf of the CUDs. but I do have a couple remarks and questions. I'll start off with another issue that emerged as a result of our conversations regarding, how do I put it, the changes to Act 71 that we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. A number of, one factor in our decision making there was whether, in the unlikely event, the worst case scenario that a CUD is moving towards failure, that a likely avenue to prevent that would be a merger with another CUD, i.e. solving the problem by uniting with another district. Again, this is not a scenario that we expect to happen and hope will not happen, but that was a potential avenue that we discussed as a workaround to this. The reason I bring this up is because as of right now, and we're pretty confident this is the case based on conversations with our lawyers, the only avenue for a CUD to do this is for towns to leave one CUD and join another one by one, which does present a solution, however, may present problems when it comes to financing, i.e. if assets and bonds belong to one CUD, does this town transition model, does that really represent an effective route to a merger in that sort of event? So what I just want the board to maybe start thinking about, and on my end, I plan on working with our lawyers on this as well and potentially proposing a policy, probably not a legislative change, but a VCBB policy that would maybe make it easier for CUDs to merge, especially as a workaround, should things, giving our turbulent times, should things go south. So I just wanted to bring that up to the board as something that the CUDs have on their mind. We do have differing opinions about this, no official position, but do think that this could be important and a good way to seal off this issue once for all. I do see Laura's hand. I'm happy to.
Laura, go ahead.
Well, I would just encourage you to think about this as needing a legislative change.
I see. Laura, can you explain your thinking there?
Well, how a CUD is created, that's in statute, and so.
Okay.
So, and I will say that perhaps it would be helpful, to have the CUD's attorney, maybe the VCBB's attorney, and Ledge Counsel that has drafted this have a brief meeting to see if in fact that's something that's needed.
Great idea.
Good idea, Laura. I think that I could probably arrange that pretty easily.
Holly, do you have a comment?
Yes, I like Laura's direction there a lot, but it also begs the question of if a CUD was not able to meet its financial responsibility, hypothetically, the governing board of the CUD might have a vote to transfer its liabilities and responsibilities, as well as its assets, to another CUD. And in the statute, that transfer of assets would have to come before this body, which is good as long as this body's around. But there is a way, before it even got to receivership, that the governing board of one CUD could agree to a transfer of assets to another CUD and presumably would become members of that CUD. But anyway, more legal expertise than I can give it has the opportunity to flesh that out.
Excellent point, Holly. I think that this issue does warrant more exploration. I think that just trying to look out for all possible scenarios here, and with the right protections in place, I think it's something we won't have to worry about for a long time. So, Laura, I will take your advice on that. We'll pursue this for a couple of different legal perspectives, and if a change is necessary, the Association of CUDs will propose it if the VCBB does not do that before we do. Okay, a couple of other things. I'll move on to this question first. Regarding the proposed RFPs for regulatory support and I'm trying to bring up the exact language. The two RFPs that were just discussed. I guess my first question about that is, the CUDs have not taken this up at a meeting yet to see whether, we support this idea or not. For me personally, when I see, the ability to bring in additional expertise to support us in some very difficult regulatory and contract issues, I see it as a positive. But I am curious about, what the mechanism for funding this will be. Assuming that not all CUDs will face a need to leverage these resources, as some already have their regulatory work in place and their contracts made. It's not too big of a concern, but would Stan or Christine be able to shed any light to us on, how these resources would be distributed?
Yes, we have money in the VCB budget for regulatory expertise. So we were not planning on, charging the CUDs for this directly for this, if that answers your question.
Understood. So this would be out of the VCBB's separate budget. Yes, I guess that made sense, but I just wanted that to be voiced. My other question regarding that is, right now I've written 2 RFPs for accounting and auditing support for CUDs as needed across the state, and they're under review. I guess I'm just wondering, as both my association that I work for, the CUDA and the VCBB, are both charged with distributing shared services. Is there any way that we should be coordinating on this, or do both of our organizations issue our own RFPs and just provide support to the CUDs as we come across it? Because I was looking at the RFPs and they're very similar to what I've written for other professional services. So I guess that's just something that's on my mind, but I don't think that it raises any significant issues.
Yeah, we'll work with you, Will, whatever the best answer for that is.
Okay, well, again, we're all working towards the same goal, so it doesn't really seem like we need to reorganize anything too dramatically. I'd like to touch a little bit on what Christine said just now about the labor issues. I've talked with Christine and Rob a little bit about the labor strategy. I have kind of stepped back. Was taking a somewhat aggressive approach to trying to resolve these issues. After talking with the representatives from our CUD working group, I've kind of stepped back the need to press forward with immediate contracting from these different sources. But I think it's really good that Christine especially is pursuing them, and happy to support wherever necessary. My approach, I'm trying to take a slightly different tack now, and just take a look at our labor needs and our labor problems one step at a time. And in terms of the construction process, the first step is make ready. And so I'd like to raise a couple issues to the VCBB about this, where I think we could use some support. My understanding, and admittedly, I may have gaps in my knowledge and my thinking here, is that utilities across the state, at least the major ones, which cover the majority of the state's territory, have 3 pre-qualified contractors each that perform make-ready work. And on top of that, my understanding now is that although some of these contractors are known to the CUDs and are ready to begin contracting to perform make-ready work, and have a lot of the resources that we're going to need across the state to do so, other utilities have not disclosed these contractors, which is preventing CUDs from contacting them and contracting with them just the same. So I'm wondering if the VCBB is aware of this issue, or if there's any way to essentially prod the utilities into getting their pre-qualified contractors to do make-ready work for us. I don't know if that question makes sense, or if the VCBB has already thought about this issue or dealt with it, but I think considering make-ready work is coming up and we are in need of contracting, that is our most direct route to assess where we're really at and being able to get that work done.
So Will, what I hear you saying is that you may be running into some utilities that aren't being as disclosive. Maybe clarify your question, clarify your statement.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right, Christine, or at least that's how it's been brought to my attention by CUDs. I have not personally made these requests to the utilities, but that's my understanding of the situation. and that there's CUDs that are very eager to figure out where these firms are. That's part of the issue. Along the same lines, also facing concerns from CUDs about the poles themselves. That there may be a much higher rate of poles that are damaged or derelict across the state, and that the utilities themselves have not really done much work to remedy that. So I guess I'm just kind of bringing this up to the VCBB because with your connection to the Department of Public Service, it seems like your board may have a more clear avenue to influencing these issues with the utilities.
Can we set up maybe put this on the agenda for the next VCUDA meeting, or maybe set up a separate meeting?
Absolutely.
I can understand the issues. Yep.
I planned on that, Christine. I think it would be good to hear from some of the CUDs that are actually dealing with this issue firsthand. But I did want to bring it up here today.
Yeah, that's in our charter to help. So I'm more than happy to help.
Right, I think
and
that,
Will, it may also be that rather than the utilities being derelict, as you characterized it, they may not have contract staff. Either they don't have funds for contract staff, or they're not able to use contract staff given the geographic area. I know for Washington Electric Co-op, when I left, there was no contract staff available to do that work, and there's no funds in the budget to do that work. And certainly some of the pole infrastructure, there's always a certain amount of poles that just through the natural life of pole aging need to be replaced. It's not utilities ignoring the CUDs, it's a balance of budgets and what you can do, and just pole inventory that's the nature of the beast.
Noted, Patty, and I am aware of the constraints. I just trying to think a little bit ahead when it comes to how quickly we're going to have to deploy our resources to get make ready done. In the very coming months. So I guess I'm just trying to think about that and be prepared so that we aren't too held back by make ready issues. Because with this construction season coming up so quickly, delays are likely to snowball.
Certainly the last time we talked to utilities, everyone is very much proactive and wants to work with the CUDs, but there's only so much that, there's other work that has to continue to happen. So I think the utilities, all the maintenance folks and the directors of operation all have their thumb on the scale to get it done, but it's a balancing act if they have other work that they have to do too. At least that's what I heard when we had all the operations folks in.
Thank you, Patty. That's very helpful, and I am aware that is the case. Learning what the utility landscape is like day by day. So just want that is I'd say one of the key concerns of the CUDs right now, being able to complete the make ready in a timely fashion. So I thought it prudent to bring up, and I expect I will do so again. Mm-hmm. But by and large, the main concern of the CUDs right now is to complete detailed design in the construction grant RFP. That's where the focus is right now. I'm working on some other things on the sideline. Namely, I think that we're going to have some NTIA comments as well that I'm preparing. I'll admit that the work that VCBB staff has done on that is very helpful to me as I prepare the CUD perspective, which is very similar in a lot of ways. And hopefully Vermont will have some of the most comprehensive comments on this program, and we'll have some influence there. So that's basically all I have to note from my list here. But I'm happy to take some questions or provide some more information if I've left any gaps. And thank you for having the time to speak about our perspective.
Yeah, just to close, Will, I'll take the action item to get with you, and we'll pull something together.
Christine, in reference to what?
In reference to the make ready challenge.
Oh yeah, great. I think that we should at least have a conversation about the Christine, and I think a VCUDA meeting is a good way to start. Essentially this time next week, figure out where the different CUDs are at, and for me, I see it as a good first step in the next phase of our workforce development project. I was looking a little bit too far in the future, I think, and one step at a time, I think, would be the best way to determining what our actual contracting resources are. But I'll continue to work, Christine, to help you establish those let's say, last resort or backup resources for labor. I think that with those in place, we will be good to go. It's just a matter of exhausting one supply of labor at a time.
Okay. Okay, hearing no other comments or questions, thank you very much, Will.
Thank you.
We'll move on to, we are at public input. Christine, can you run public input for us?
Yes, let me hang on. I saw a couple hands come up. I'm not sure what order they came up, but I will, I'll start with Roger Deasy because I know Roger's been waiting. Go ahead, Roger. And you'll have to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to provide some public comment today. Regarding the comments to NTIA, I'm questioning whether, if you look at 19 and the first bullet point, which is only fund community-owned networks, or in the alternative, at least prioritize community-owned networks. And then on 24, the first bullet point, only fund community-owned networks, or in the alternative, at least provide incentives for community-owned networks. And my question is, can the VCBB make those statements given Act 71 includes other providers under its eligible carriers definition?
Good question.
That's a good question. Yep, we'll call that I'll take note of that. That's what I would call an excellent question, because I don't have an answer for that.
Can I make a comment to that?
Yeah.
The solution to the problem that Roger so aptly addresses himself to should follow the statute, where eligible providers may be required to have a community provider in tow or collaboration. So that, Roger, might be helpful.
So you would say a eligible carrier working with the town then would be considered community in this instance?
I would, but
yeah,
I think that's consistent with the legislation.
I think we just need to retool the responses, Christine, to include the definition of eligible provider from the Act 61.
Yep.
The community owned and eligible provider as noted in Act 71.
Yep.
Laura, did you have a comment?
I think that does it. But I guess I would be clear that it is not a town in Vermont's legislation. That is not the definition. It's a CUD. So find a way, I would say, to deal with that, Stan and Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
I do have one other question, but it can wait until after
No,
Steve goes, since he's. So in the application process, there's a timeline, and the timeline is that the grant application can be submitted 10 days before a board meeting, and it's 10 business days. So say if you approve a pre-application grant on the 14th, this means that if the entity wanted to get approval by the end of the month, it would have to submit the application on the same day that the pre-application is approved. Just wanted to point that out, and hopefully that applications that come within the 10-day period could be considered so that they can get approved as quickly as possible. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Steve Huffaker, you're next.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Roger, for reading my mind there with that second question. 2 items. I just want to confirm something about the contract drafting and negotiation RFP. I'm assuming that in the case of Maple Broadband, we have already executed an agreement with Wakefield and Champlain Valley Tel. So my assumption is that RFP, we'd be essentially out of scope for that RFP. Is that a safe assumption? And the reason I'm asking the question is, if our agreement is opened up for review, our entire business plan falls apart and all of our future plans. So I would urge you to please confirm that it's out of scope. I'm not asking you to do that at the moment, but if you think you might want to include it in scope, I would like an opportunity to help you understand the consequences of such a decision. That's item one. I can stop if you want to talk about that. It's up to you.
Yeah, let's take it one at a time here. Holly?
I think I said in my comments anyway, Steve, that we're not here to lawyer over existing agreements. I think it might behoove the VCBB to review existing agreements for their compliance with the statute or any board policies. And that might then in turn mean that you need to get an amendment where it's appropriate, but only in furtherance of existing agreements. But that's not the purpose of the RFP, to be sure. And I think we are advised by Laura to make sure that this assistance that we're offering was in fact received as assistance.
Great. Very helpful. Thank you. Second comment came upon a revelation. We completed, we've just revised our build plan to take into account the incidental overbuild requirements that's specified in the RFP. And kind of surprised to learn that only about 28% of our territory, of our potential subscribers would qualify. What that means from a access to the municipal, to the bond market means is that according to Jim Anderson, we need about 1,000 or more subscribers to gain access to the bond market. And if we follow the guidance, and if the only funding we receive to build our network in the coming years is from VCBB's grants, with that caveat in it, we will not be able to access the bond market until after we've completed our full build. In other words, we're basically looking at fewer than 1,000 subscribers for the full build. So I don't know how you arrived at that 20% factor. I think there may be a concern across with other CUDs, and I wanted you to be aware of it. If certainly you're not going to want to take my word for that, we do have a pretty clear-cut spreadsheet I'd be willing to share with you, and so you could maybe tinker with those numbers to see for yourself what we've run into. Would also kind of suggest maybe our territory doesn't look like other territories. Certainly ours doesn't. Certainly we don't look like NEK, for example. So that may be a whole different model. But if there's truth to what Jim Anderson said about 1,000 subscribers and the 20% overbuild, incidental overbuild factor, and what it does to what we can connect to, it's alarming from our perspective.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting problem. In the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Act, part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that's where that 20% number comes from. It looks like that's what the number is going to be as part of the grant program. We don't have that under ARPA that I'm aware of. But that's it. You bring up an interesting problem, and I guess we've got to work through that, figure it. And we can come back with a recommendation to the board of how to resolve that. But that's new news, Steve. And it sounds like a problem we need to work through.
Yeah, and it also has a significant impact on how we might deploy. We got kind of a Swiss cheese environment where we've got a little territory here, a little territory there that we can build today. And so we'll be building a lot of backbone, but not extending a lot of connections. So that's not optimal. It's not very efficient. Well, thanks, whatever you can do.
Okay, we'll file. I've got that as an action item. Maybe Will has some thoughts. Will's next.
Steve,
Yeah,
if there are some limits, have you thought about consolidating CUDs, basically becoming a larger CUD footprint?
We thought about it. It certainly hasn't been part of our initial discussions. When we started negotiating with Waitsfield and Champlain Valley Tel, we mutually agreed that we needed to keep it small during our negotiations. So the other factor, I think, is that we're hemmed in on the east by the Green Mountains. There's a little bit of EC fiber over there, but that's a bit of a hop to get over to them. On the west side, obviously, we've got Lake Champlain. The north end, we're kind of Chittenden County, which is problematic, as you know. So it kind of narrows it down to Otter Creek, and I don't want to speak to Otter Creek, but that appears to be the only potential recourse that we might look at.
Okay.
So, Patty, may I?
Yes, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I would hope that the board and VCBB would be able to provide a lot of support to helping that be considered. Either working with you and your partner to figure it out, or working with you and potential other CUDs, like Otter Creek, which so, and I would support providing additional support to kind of to help facilitate those discussions, Christine. I don't know if how the rest of the board would feel, but it feels pretty important, as we're trying to figure out right sizing and optimal sizing, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Steve, I'll get back to you. We'll definitely work through that. So Will is next.
Yeah, I'm back. I just wanted to build on a couple of points that Steve made or discussed there. First off, with regard to the question of Otter Creek, I'm happy to help and support in those discussions as well. I know that Otter Creek right now is working on a pretty key RFP to establish a construction partner. I think that's fair enough to say, and so now might be a good moment for those conversations to happen. And I'm really happy to participate in that as well and try to move this process along. However, I'd also like to touch on another possible solution, which is that with regard to overbuild, the new Treasury final rule for American Rescue Plan funding has made the restrictions for overbuilds, I would say, extremely broad. I mean, I don't have the language in front of me, but it says to the effect that the funds can be used basically anywhere where the need for faster, more reliable internet connection can be demonstrated. I know this is not part of the RFP as designed or part of Act 71, but I just think that it's worth considering that using some of this language from the Treasury final rule might really enable our business plans and our detailed designs to be a lot more flexible in terms of what areas they target. Haven't brought this up because figured that the policy we had in place was pretty strong. We had a pretty good consensus on it, but that new final rule has pretty flexible requirements for using these ARPA funds for overbuild. So I just want that to be on the table.
Does that final rule apply to the IIJA?
Christine, the rules for the IIJA as it stands are a little bit different. That would be the 20% mark up to 120 is the overbuild threshold. However, I would anticipate that the final rule for that act has the potential to take shape the same way that for the American Rescue Plan did. But since we're dealing with American Rescue Plan funding now, maybe worth considering amending our policy to fit with that final rule, although it wouldn't be mandatory as far as I know, considering that the state can make whatever policy it sees fit within those parameters.
Yeah, I asked that question only because we want to make sure we include that in the NTIA feedback for the final rule as well. For the
I think that
IIJ.
I think the IIJA policy is pretty much still in line with the overbuild as it was originally in the American Rescue Plan. But that final rule, and I can get that language, I can send that language to Christine if you don't have it already. It's pretty broad in terms of how it approaches this issue. And I think it could solve the issue for Maple Broadband. I will note that it also, if we were to use some kind of measures like that, it would open up a lot of other. It has the potential to open up other issues as well. But I definitely see it as the solution for Maple in this situation.
All right, well, we'll come back to the board with a recommendation after, after we meet.
Noted. And we could potentially discuss this with the CUDs on Monday as well.
Anybody else want to provide some input here? I don't see any other hands.
Okay, so let's move along then, not hearing any other folks that want to speak up. Our next item on the agenda is the parking lot and next meeting.
Okay, I will pull the parking lot up here. It should be in the packet, I hope. Oh no, it was mailed separately. Let me pull that up. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, unfortunately, I pulled it up on my other computer. Hang on. Stan, do you have that parking lot? I have to email it to my other computer, sorry.
I didn't see the parking lot in the distribution. Did other board members get it? No.
Oh, it should have come under separate mailing, but.
Yeah, I'm looking for it now, Christine. I don't recall seeing it, and
I'm going to send it to you and my personal email address so that I can. I'll send it out now. You should be getting it shortly. I'm pulling it up on the screen now. I apologize. I read the delay here. I run two computers.
I see that in my screen view, it looks like Will Anderson still has his hand up. I don't know if that is on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, there it goes.
Okay. Now I will share my screen. Okay, can you see the parking lot?
Yep, it's there. We can see it.
Okay. So, if you look at the first three items are complete. Bond market objectives for sustainability. What are the benchmarks?
So this actually did not happen.
No, it did not happen. Okay, so that we've got to do in the future. This one's not done. I suppose that's going to depend on us. Well, well, anyway, we'll put it on a future board meeting. I'm not sure how we're going to achieve that goal, but So bullet number 5, we're purchasing some software for that. We actually can come in and present our plan. We have that built as part of the GIS plan. We can present that in a future meeting.
And Christine, if it's helpful to you on number 4, I can give you my recollections on what we were trying to achieve there. And we can talk about it offline.
All right, we'll talk. But we'll do a presentation on that. Fiber purchase is done. Make ready construction policy. Policy is standard make ready was part of the construction grant program. That was all the debate, as you remember, back and forth about where we were going to include make ready costs. We settled on that. Policy on material default.
Can you create a form that says that something? I mean, I see completed, but
yeah, I should probably take them out, right? Or at least put them in or color code them differently.
Yeah.
Actually, why don't I create 2 forms? One that shows the open items and one that shows the closed items. How's that sound?
That'd be awesome. Awesome for you, I would think too.
Yeah, make it easier to present, that's for sure. Policy on material default. That was part of the presentation we made today. That was it. 8086 C2. So timeline's done.
Was the comment on timeline implicated by Steve Huffaker's comment today? Then number 9. Is that's something else, right? Like the timeline for the VCBB construction and reporting doesn't. I mean, do we have that as a presentation someplace, like what our timeline is?
Well, yeah, that was way back in November 22nd. That was about when are we going to get the RFP completed?
Yeah, but I guess I'm asking a variation of the question. So we did it. You had a timeline, we did it. Are we keeping in front of ourselves a timeline and measuring our progress against it? I think that was really the goal.
Well, okay, that's an interesting question when you talk about timeline. It really depends on the CUDs for timeline, correct? You know,
well, I thought it was about when we thought we had to have our RFP out based on when we thought they were going, they were going to need the funding. And I thought it was more comprehensive if you go back to that November presentation. But it's really up to the rest of my my colleagues here. Don't we want the timeline to be a thing that we pull out and look at where we're at from time to time? But
well, when I talk about a timeline, our timeline is really going to depend on what the CUDs come in for their construction plans, correct? Well, so ultimately we're going to come up with, so the plan on our reporting side is we're going to have a plan versus actual. Here's the schedule for the addresses. We're gonna do this over 5 years. We're gonna connect. We're gonna do 1,000 miles of fiber a year, and we're gonna connect so many addresses per year. That all has to be determined by the CUD plans
and the grants to individual CUDs. Yes.
Right.
But okay, I'm going to stop. Maybe Laura has something to add here.
No. I think that if we are able to have a disciplined conversation around timeline periodically, looking at when grant funds are available to us, when they aren't, both for historical and going forward planning, basically an orientation, if you will, more than a holding people's feet to the fire. But where are we? So what is happening? How much time do we have left for these funds? How long have we had staff? Where do we have funds? So I like the idea of that being active, but really in an orienting way for the board in order and staff in order for us to kind of, and the CUD, just for us to have a big sense of where are we.
I'm thinking that was part of this objective too, Laura, and it really comes down to what is our fiscal year? When do we do our annual report? The planning milestones that we have. And some of them are recurring.
Yes, so as you talk, I'm picturing a timeline in mind. So, for example, we have, we're expecting $95 million from this, current governor's budget. When will that be accomplished? When will we have those funds available? What's our planning process? When am I going to come to the board with the 2023 budget for approval? That I get it. Of course.
So maybe that's another a new entry on your.
That's a new, yeah. I'll put that. It's the VCBB timeline. This one says construction RFP and reporting timelines, but we're actually talking about a VCBB activity timeline. Correct? Okay, got it. That will be in the.
But I feel like I want to stress that we are leading, we are making this up. And so really having a sense of, that it's helpful for us just to orient ourselves is how I would love to see that kind of being managed and developed.
Well, we do, staff has a timeline in mind. It makes sense for us to be sharing with the board. So more than happy to do that.
Great.
Yeah, I'm not sure this next bullet either. Sequence assumptions for pre-construction and construction timelines. It says RFP approved by the board on 103, but maybe that ties with the overall VCBB timeline you're talking about. I don't know what that, I really don't know what that meant now. The maps is completed.
Wait a second. We heard from the DPS on their unserved redefinition that include wireless, right? So it's completed in as much as we heard from them. But what is the resolution?
Oh, they included the wireless. They actually.
That was the problem, that they did include wireless.
Yeah, we asked them to separate it out, and they agreed to do that. And they gave us a map, a GIS file with it separated.
Okay, thank you.
So so they met our needs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Confidentiality grant agreement Act Art 5 Act state standard is the product of a grant public document. Will we post construction plans? The RFP and construction schedules will be public.
So that was the legal result of that inquiry. So the CUDs have to publish what their construction deadlines are?
Yes.
They're public.
Yep. Universal service plan and contiguous CUD construction policy completed, addressed in the construction RFP.
Mm-hmm.
And legislative considers purchase of consolidated goods were not needed.
So on your to-do list, then you have the things that come up in meetings in the normal course. Like today, there was the authority of the judiciary. There's, the timeline we just talked about, et cetera, et cetera. Did those things belong on this list, or do you, how are they tracked for you?
I think they belong on this list. So we will put those on the list. So next board meeting, you will see those on the list.
You've made a lot of progress. Congratulations.
Thank you. I've got good help. We've got a great staff. I'm very pleased.
Just gonna say, it helps that you've hired staff to help you.
Yeah, no, Rob and I are, you know, even Rob sounded a lot calmer these days too, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll update that parking lot, bring it in the next meeting, and then that's going to be part of our regular agenda.
Super, thank you.
We'll stop sharing. There we go.
All right, so in addition to the parking lot for this item, we had just identification of our next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting in 2 weeks.
So that is the 14th.
14th, yep.
Okay. And until further notice, we're going to be meeting virtually.
Right.
And every 2 weeks, Patty?
Yes. Unless we need to, or should be revisiting that to have a different schedule here. But for now, I think 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is good for right now.
Yeah, we're expecting some grant applications, so we'll we have two that I know that are coming in. So.
Okay. All right, are we ready for executive session?
Yeah, so to go into executive session, you have a different link that was sent to you by Stan.
All right, let's make a motion. I move we go into executive session to discuss items of which premature disclosure would be harmful to the VCBB. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Dan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any
So
opposed?
for the rest of you on the call, we'll we'll resume this meeting at the end of executive session, but we don't anticipate any further business.
Okay, so we're going to sign off and join the other link, correct?
Yep.
Okay. See you on the other side, folks.